Right now, at this exact moment, deep beneath the mountains of northwestern Iran, engineers are reinforcing underground facilities that the United States has spent 2 decades trying to destroy. The Pentagon claims its GBU-57 bunker buster can penetrate 200 feet of reinforced concrete before detonation. Iran's defense ministry announced yesterday that Fordo enrichment facility sits 300 feet below solid granite, protected by layers of concrete, steel, and empty chambers designed to absorb blast energy. One of these assessments is catastrophically wrong, and the difference between 200 feet and 300 feet could determine whether the Middle East avoids or plunges into the largest military confrontation since Operation Desert Storm. Let me walk you through exactly what happened in the past 72 hours that brought us to this moment. On Tuesday morning at 0430 hours local time, commercial satellite imagery from Planet Labs detected unusual activity at the Natanz fuel enrichment plant in central Iran. Analysts identified convoy movements consistent with advanced centrifuge component delivery, specifically IR-6 and IR-8 models capable of enriching uranium 5 to 10 times faster than first-generation IR-1 centrifuges. By 1200 hours Tuesday, the International Atomic Energy Agency issued a confidential report to member states noting that Iran had accumulated 182 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity, placing Tehran within weeks of weapons-grade 90% enrichment if political decision were made. At 1545 hours Tuesday, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant met with U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin at the Pentagon for unscheduled consultations lasting 3 hours. No official readout was provided, but anonymous Israeli officials told the Jerusalem Post that military options against Iranian nuclear facilities were explicitly discussed. By Wednesday morning at 600 hours, flight tracking data showed a U.S. Air Force B-2 Spirit stealth bomber departing Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, conducting mid-air refueling over the Atlantic and proceeding toward undisclosed forward operating locations. The B-2 is the only American aircraft capable of delivering the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, the 30,000-pound bunker-busting weapon specifically designed to destroy hardened underground facilities. Thursday morning at 800 hours local time, Iranian state media broadcast footage of military exercises at an undisclosed mountain facility showing Revolutionary Guard commanders inspecting what they described as impenetrable underground command centers built to withstand any attack. The timing was not coincidental. Iran was signaling that it understands American capabilities and believes its defensive architecture can survive them. To understand what happens if Iran's underground bases actually survive American bunker busters, you need to understand the weapon systems involved and the revolutionary defensive architecture Iran has constructed over 2 decades of expecting this exact scenario. The GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator represents the pinnacle of American penetration technology. This weapon weighs 30,000 pounds, measures 20 feet in length, and achieves terminal velocity exceeding 700 miles per hour when released from high altitude. The weapon's hardened steel casing contains 5,300 pounds of high explosive designed to detonate after penetration rather than on impact. According to unclassified Pentagon assessments, the GBU-57 can penetrate 200 feet of reinforced concrete or 100 feet of harder granite before detonation. Only the B-2 Spirit bomber can carry this weapon due to its massive size and weight. Each B-2 carries 2 GBU-57s in its internal weapons bay. The United States Air Force possesses approximately 20 B-2 bombers and fewer than 100 GBU-57 weapons in total inventory. This means America has finite capacity for bunker-busting strikes regardless of political will. Iran knows these numbers as well as the Pentagon does. Iran's defensive strategy relies not on matching American penetration technology, but on rendering it insufficient through depth, deception, and redundancy. The Fordo facility sits inside a mountain near the holy city of Qom, constructed between 2006 and 2009, in absolute secrecy until Western intelligence agencies discovered it through signals intelligence. The facility's entrance tunnels extend horizontally into the mountainside before descending to the main enrichment halls. Iranian engineers positioned the actual centrifuge cascades beneath an estimated 300 feet of solid granite mountain, not poured concrete. Granite presents significantly greater challenge to penetration weapons than concrete due to its density and the unpredictable fracture patterns it creates when struck. The facility's design includes multiple empty chambers and reinforced buffer zones between the surface and critical infrastructure, specifically engineered to absorb and dissipate blast energy before it reaches sensitive equipment. Intelligence assessments from the Institute for Science and International Security suggest Fordow could survive even direct GBU-57 strikes depending on impact angles and geological variables. The Natanz facility employs different defensive architecture. After Israeli sabotage destroyed substantial portions of the above-ground Natanz facility in 2021, Iran constructed a new underground facility beneath the site, positioning centrifuge halls an estimated 50 to 80 feet below ground level. This depth falls well within GBU-57 penetration capability, making Natanz vulnerable to bunker-busting strikes. But Iran learned from Fordow's design and incorporated modular redundancy into Natanz's new architecture. Rather than concentrating all enrichment capacity in a single deep chamber, Iran distributed centrifuge cascades across multiple separate halls connected by tunnels. Destroying one hall would not eliminate enrichment capability if parallel facilities survive. Iran has also constructed numerous decoy facilities and hardened command bunkers at undisclosed locations across the country, forcing American intelligence to identify and target each separately, while Iran potentially conceals the most critical infrastructure in locations still unknown to Western intelligence. Here's why this matters strategically and why the scenario of surviving bunker busters represents an absolute nightmare for American and Israeli military planners. From the United States perspective, military action against Iranian nuclear facilities represents the option of last resort after diplomacy fails. The entire strategic logic depends on capability to eliminate or significantly set back Iran's nuclear program through precision strikes, buying time for diplomatic solutions or regime change. If bunker busters fail to destroy underground facilities, the United States faces catastrophic strategic failure. Iran's nuclear program continues while America has exhausted its most powerful conventional weapon and triggered regional war without achieving the objective that justified military action. Tehran would claim victory, demonstrating that American military superiority has limits and that determined adversaries can defend critical infrastructure even against superpower attack. Every American adversary from North Korea to Russia would study Iran's defensive architecture and replicate successful elements. The credibility of American military threats globally would collapse if the most sophisticated bunker-busting weapons in existence fail against their primary target. From Iran's perspective, surviving American bunker busters would represent the ultimate vindication of its defensive strategy and massive propaganda victory demonstrating regime resilience. Iran has invested an estimated $20 billion over 2 decades constructing underground facilities specifically designed to survive American attack. If those facilities actually survive, Iran proves that asymmetric defensive investment can neutralize symmetric American technological advantage. The regime would achieve the nuclear threshold it has pursued for decades, while demonstrating that American military power cannot prevent determined adversaries from acquiring strategic capabilities. Hardliners in Tehran would be emboldened, moderates discredited, and any possibility of diplomatic compromise eliminated for a generation. According to Dr. Jeffrey Lewis, director of the East Asia Non-Proliferation Program at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies, the psychological impact of failed bunker-buster strikes could prove more significant than the physical impact. In congressional testimony last year, Dr. Lewis explained that American deterrence in the Middle East depends on the perception that the United States possesses overmatch capability to achieve military objectives when it chooses to act. If Iran survives the most powerful conventional weapons America possesses, that perception collapses, and with it the entire architecture of regional deterrence that has prevented major wars for decades. The scenario also creates impossible choices for Israeli decision-makers. Israel has invested enormous resources in military capabilities designed to strike Iranian nuclear facilities independently of American support. But Israeli bunker-busting capability remains inferior to American systems. If GBU-57s fail to destroy Fordow, Israeli weapons certainly cannot succeed. This means Israel would face the choice between accepting a nuclear threshold Iran it cannot prevent or escalating to nuclear weapons use itself, crossing a threshold that would isolate Israel internationally and potentially trigger Iranian nuclear retaliation if Tehran has secretly achieved weaponization capability. The escalation dynamics become exponentially more dangerous in a scenario where conventional bunker busters fail. There are 3 possible scenarios that emerge if American bunker-busting strikes fail to destroy Iran's underground nuclear facilities, and understanding each scenario's probability and trajectory is essential to grasping what comes next. Scenario 1 represents controlled escalation with limited strategic impact, carrying approximately 35% probability based on current conditions. In this pathway, American GBU-57 strikes achieve partial success, destroying some underground facilities while others survive. The United States conducts battle damage assessment using satellite imagery and signals intelligence, determines that Iran's enrichment capability has been degraded by 40 to 60%, and declares mission success while acknowledging that complete destruction was not achieved. Iran claims victory because key facilities survived, continues enrichment operations at reduced capacity, and refrains from immediate military retaliation to avoid further American strikes. Both sides claim success to domestic audiences while privately acknowledging the operation produced mixed results. Diplomatic efforts resume within 3 to 6 months as both sides recognize that military options have been tested and found insufficient to resolve the crisis. This scenario requires that American strikes achieve enough damage to satisfy domestic political pressure for action, while Iran's leadership calculates that restraint serves long-term interests better than retaliation. The scenario's feasibility depends on both sides having off-ramps and domestic political space to claim success without demanding total victory. Current probability sits at 35% because rational actors in crisis situations often find compromise pathways even after military confrontation. Scenario 2 envisions catastrophic military escalation into regional war, with probability currently estimated at 30 to 35%, depending on Iranian leadership decisions in the critical hours after American strikes. In this nightmare pathway, bunker-buster strikes fail to destroy Fordo and other critical facilities. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei orders immediate massive retaliation against American forces across the region to demonstrate that attacks on Iranian territory will not be tolerated. Within 12 hours, Iranian ballistic missiles strike the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, housing U.S. Central Command Forward Headquarters, Bahrain's naval support activity hosting the Fifth Fleet, and Al Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates, where American F-35 squadrons operate. Simultaneously, Iranian proxy forces activate across the region. Hezbollah launches rocket barrages at northern Israel from Lebanon. Houthi forces in Yemen fire anti-ship missiles at U.S. Navy vessels transiting the Red Sea. Iranian-backed militias in Iraq attack American embassy compound in Baghdad with suicide drones. Iran deploys naval mines across the Strait of Hormuz choke point through which 21% of global oil supplies flow, closing the waterway and triggering immediate oil price spikes to $150 per barrel. The United States faces impossible choice between accepting humiliating defeat or launching massive retaliation that escalates into full-scale war. American stealth bombers begin striking Iranian Revolutionary Guard Command facilities, missile bases, and leadership compounds. Iran responds by attacking Saudi Arabian oil infrastructure at Abqaiq and Khurais, eliminating 5 million barrels per day of global oil production. Within 72 hours, Israel joins the conflict with strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities and Hezbollah positions in Lebanon and Syria. By day 5, casualty counts reach thousands. Oil approaches $200 per barrel. Global recession begins as energy prices collapse economic activity. The scenario spirals toward regional war consuming multiple countries with consequences lasting decades. This scenario's 30 to 35% probability reflects Iran's known doctrine of massive retaliation against attacks on its territory and the psychological pressure on Iranian leadership to demonstrate strength after surviving American assault. Scenario 3 represents the most strategically consequential outcome with approximately 30% probability. Iran successfully conceals nuclear weapons development after surviving bunker-buster strikes, achieving nuclear threshold status before international community recognizes the fact. In this pathway, American strikes fail to destroy underground facilities at Fordo and other undisclosed locations. Iran conducts battle damage assessment, determines that its most critical infrastructure survived intact, and makes strategic decision to accelerate toward weaponization before the United States or Israel attempts additional strikes. Within 6 to 9 months, using advanced centrifuges protected in surviving underground facilities, Iran enriches sufficient weapons-grade uranium for 3 to 5 nuclear devices. Iranian scientists conduct final weaponization engineering at underground facilities Western intelligence agencies have never identified. Iran does not conduct nuclear tests to avoid international detection. Instead, Tehran privately communicates to regional adversaries through diplomatic back channels that it has achieved nuclear capability and possesses deliverable weapons. The United States and Israel face intelligence indicators suggesting Iranian nuclear achievement but cannot confirm with certainty. Do they launch additional military strikes based on incomplete intelligence, risking war with a potentially nuclear-armed adversary? Do they accept nuclear-armed Iran and shift to containment and deterrence strategies? The strategic ambiguity paralyzes decision-making while Iran consolidates nuclear status. Within 18 months, satellite imagery and intelligence collection confirm Iranian nuclear weapons capability. The non-proliferation regime collapses as Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey initiate crash nuclear programs, refusing to accept Iranian nuclear monopoly in the region. Within a decade, the Middle East hosts 6 to 8 nuclear weapon states with intersecting conflicts, proxy wars, and territorial disputes. The probability of nuclear use somewhere in the region within 20 years approaches certainty, according to proliferation experts. This scenario represents the deepest strategic nightmare because it cannot be reversed once achieved. Watch for 5 critical indicators in the next 24 to 72 hours that will reveal which scenario is materializing and whether Iran's underground facilities can actually survive American bunker busters. First, B-2 bomber deployment patterns. If multiple B-2s deploy to Diego Garcia or undisclosed Middle Eastern locations within the next week, American military planners are preparing strike options and testing Iranian defensive responses. Second, Iranian centrifuge activity at monitored facilities. If IAEA inspectors report sudden increases in enrichment activity or movement of advanced centrifuges to Fordo, Iran is concentrating capabilities in facilities it believes can survive attack. Third, oil market futures pricing. If 6-month oil futures spike above $95 per barrel, markets are pricing in significant probability of strikes and Iranian retaliation affecting supply. Fourth, Israeli cabinet meetings and reserve mobilization. If Israel begins recalling military reserves or conducting civil defense drills, Jerusalem is preparing for Iranian retaliation scenarios following American or Israeli strikes. Fifth, Russian and Chinese diplomatic activity. If Moscow or Beijing suddenly propose new diplomatic frameworks or schedule emergency Security Council sessions, they possess intelligence suggesting imminent military action and are attempting to create off-ramps. I'm tracking this situation minute by minute using satellite imagery analysis, defense publication monitoring, and expert network consultation. When the next critical development breaks, when B-2 bombers deploy or Iranian facilities detect preparation for attack, when diplomatic efforts succeed or collapse catastrophically, you will understand the implications here first with the technical depth and strategic analysis you cannot access through mainstream media coverage. Subscribe to this channel immediately and activate all notifications. The next 72 hours could determine whether diplomacy prevents the largest Middle East war in decades or whether American bunker busters fail against Iranian underground facilities, triggering regional catastrophe. Drop a comment answering 3 questions. Do you believe Fordow can actually survive GBU-57 strikes given the 300-foot depth claim? Do you think the United States will attempt bunker buster strikes within the next 6 months? Do you believe Iran has already achieved covert nuclear weapons capability that surviving facilities would accelerate toward deployment? I read every comment and your strategic assessments inform my ongoing analysis. The talks have stalled. The centrifuges are spinning. The bunker busters are ready. And the difference between 200 feet and 300 feet of mountain granite will determine everything.